The sound of Harley-Davidson engines thundering down Maple Street at 7 in the morning was not what Karen expected when she planned her wellness retreat in my backyard. Again, without my permission. Again. I watched from my kitchen window as her face went from smug satisfaction to absolute horror. 30 leather-clad bikers were rolling up to my driveway, their motorcycles drowning out the peaceful meditation music she had set up on my property. The yoga mats scattered across my lawn suddenly looked very out of place next to the chrome and steel parade parking in front of my house. Karen stormed toward me, her wellness retreat coordinator clipboard clutched in her white-knuckled fists. Her mouth was moving, but I could not hear a word over the beautiful symphony of motorcycle engines. That was the moment I knew my plan had worked perfectly. After months of her stealing my yard for her neighborhood events, I had finally found the perfect way to fight back. 3 months earlier, I came home from a 10-hour shift at the hospital to find tables, chairs, and a full catering setup covering every inch of my backyard. The smell of expensive wine and fancy cheese drifted through my kitchen window. Laughter echoed off my fence. Strangers were walking through my garden, stepping on my flowers, and using my outdoor electrical outlets. Karen Morrison stood in the center of it all like she owned the place. She wore a flowing white dress and held a wine glass high in the air, giving some speech to 40 people I had never seen before. My backyard had been transformed into an elegant garden party, complete with string lights hung from my trees and a professional photographer capturing every moment. I walked outside, still wearing my scrubs, feeling like an intruder in my own space. The conversation stopped. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Karen lowered her wine glass and smiled that fake, patronizing smile I had grown to hate. "Oh, there you are," she called out, like I was late to my party. "Everyone, this is our wonderful host. We are so grateful you volunteered your beautiful space for our neighborhood appreciation dinner." Volunteered. The word hit me like a slap. I had never volunteered for anything. I had never even been asked. I looked around at the faces staring at me, all of them nodding and smiling like this was completely normal, like I had agreed to let 40 strangers take over my private property. "I never volunteered for this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The photographer lowered his camera. The uncomfortable silence stretched on forever. Karen laughed, a high-pitched sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, you are so modest. Of course you did. The HOA Community Events Committee approved this weeks ago. You signed off on the request form." I had signed no request form. I had received no committee communication. I had never even heard of a community events committee. But standing there in front of 40 people with Karen speaking so confidently, I started to doubt myself. Had I missed something? Had there been paperwork I forgot about? "I think there has been a mistake," I said, my voice getting stronger. "I need everyone to leave, now." The fake smile never left Karen's face, but her eyes turned ice cold. "Well, that would be very embarrassing for everyone here. The HOA bylaws clearly state that designated community spaces can be used for approved neighborhood events. Your backyard was designated last month." Designated by who? When? I felt my face getting hot. My hands started shaking. These people were looking at me like I was the problem, like I was being unreasonable for wanting my backyard back. I pulled out my phone and called the police. The dispatcher said they would send someone out, but it could be a while since there was no immediate danger. I stood there, watching strangers eat catered food at tables set up on my lawn, feeling completely powerless. Officer Martinez arrived an hour later, just as the party was winding down. By then, Karen had painted me as an unstable neighbor who was confused about community policies. She showed him official-looking paperwork with the HOA letterhead. She spoke in calm, reasonable tones while I probably looked frantic and upset. "This appears to be a civil matter," Officer Martinez told me after speaking with Karen privately. "No property damage has occurred, and she has documentation showing HOA approval. You might want to contact your homeowners association to clarify their event policies." The police car drove away. The catering truck drove away. The 40 strangers drove away. Karen was the last to leave, stopping at my front door with that terrible smile still plastered on her face. "Thanks again for hosting," she said brightly. "Same time next month." Karen Morrison had been systematically taking over my backyard for 8 months, and I was just now realizing how expertly she had been playing the long game. It started small. Last spring, she knocked on my door with homemade cookies and asked if she could use my backyard for a tiny garden club meeting. Just 6 ladies, she promised, just for an hour. She had such a reasonable explanation. Her yard was being re-landscaped. The community center was booked. She would bring everything and clean up afterward. I said yes because saying no seemed petty. She kept her word that first time. 6 ladies, 1 hour, everything cleaned up perfectly. She even left me a thank you note with more cookies. The second time, 2 weeks later, it was a pool party for the neighborhood kids. 15 children, she said, just a few hours on Saturday afternoon. My backyard had the biggest flat space and the best shade. The kids needed somewhere safe to play. Again, how could I say no without looking selfish? But 15 kids turned into 25 kids plus their parents. 2 hours turned into 6 hours. My water bill doubled that month from the slip and slide and water balloon fights. My lawn was destroyed by running feet and inflatable pools. When I mentioned the lawn damage, Karen offered to pay for reseeding. She never did. When I brought it up again, she looked confused and said she thought we had agreed the community would handle lawn maintenance for properties used for neighborhood events. The third time was a book club meeting. 8 women, she said. Just coffee and discussion in my gazebo. But 8 women became 12 women became 16 women and coffee became a full brunch spread with mimosas. They rearranged my outdoor furniture. They moved my potted plants. They hung decorations from my trees. Each time, Karen had a reasonable explanation for why my yard was the only option. Each time, the event was bigger than described. Each time, she acted like I had enthusiastically agreed to details I had never heard before. I started keeping notes. Dates, times, number of people, damages, and promises broken. The pattern became crystal clear. Karen was gradually escalating her takeovers, testing my boundaries, seeing how much she could get away with. But the real breakthrough came when I started talking to other neighbors. Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down mentioned how grateful she was that I had volunteered my space for community events. Mr. Rodriguez, across the street, thanked me for being so generous with my property for neighborhood gatherings. Karen had been telling everyone that I was a willing participant. More than that, she had been painting me as the enthusiastic host who loved opening my home for community building. She had created a narrative where refusing her requests would make me look selfish and antisocial. I decided to check the actual HOA bylaws. What I found made my blood boil. There was no community events committee. There was no policy about designated community spaces. There was absolutely nothing in our HOA rules that gave anyone the authority to use private property for neighborhood events without explicit written consent from the property owner. Karen had been lying about everything. The official-looking paperwork she showed the police was completely fake. The authority she claimed to have did not exist. The community policies she kept referencing were fiction. But she had been so confident, so official-sounding that everyone believed her, including me sometimes. She had weaponized social pressure and fake authority to steal my property piece by piece. The final straw came when Mrs. Patterson from the corner house mentioned how much she was looking forward to Karen's big summer event in my backyard. A 3-day wellness retreat, she said. Yoga classes, meditation workshops, and organic catering. 50 people over 3 days. Karen had not mentioned any 3-day event to me. She had not asked permission for anything involving 50 people. She was planning to take over my property for an entire weekend, and she was advertising it to the neighborhood like it were already confirmed. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being reasonable. I was done trying to work within a system that Karen had corrupted with lies and manipulation. I was done being the polite neighbor who got stepped on by someone with no respect for boundaries. If Karen wanted to play games with fake authority and community pressure, I would show her what real power looked like. I would fight back using the same tactics she had been using against me. But I would do it better, and I would do it completely legally. The war for my backyard was about to begin. The invitation arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday morning, printed on expensive cardstock with elegant gold lettering. Maple Street Wellness Retreat, it announced in flowing script. A 3-day journey of mind, body, and spirit renewal. The dates were the upcoming weekend. The location was listed as the Morrison Community Garden Space. The Morrison Community Garden Space. That was my backyard. Karen had given my property a fake name and was advertising it like she owned it. I read the invitation 3 times, my hands shaking with rage. Yoga classes from 7 in the morning until 9 at night. Meditation workshops. Organic meal preparation. Overnight camping for committed participants. 50 attendees expected. Professional instructors hired. Vendors contracted. She had planned a 3-day festival in my backyard without asking me. She had sent invitations to the entire neighborhood. She had booked entertainment and catering. She was charging people money to attend an event on my private property. I stormed out of my house and marched straight to Karen's front door. She answered wearing yoga pants and a serene smile, like she had been expecting me. "Oh, hi there," she said in that fake sweet voice. "I was just about to come talk to you about this weekend. The wellness retreat is going to be magical. I have arranged for sound healing, crystal therapy, and organic meal preparation. The whole community is so excited." "You cannot use my backyard," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I never agreed to this. I want you to cancel it immediately." Karen tilted her head like she was confused. "Cancel it? But we have contracts signed, deposits paid. People have taken time off work. You cannot just change your mind at the last minute." I never made my mind up in the first place. My voice was getting louder. "You never asked me. You just decided to use my property and told everyone I agreed." "Well, that is simply not true," Karen said, her voice still maddeningly calm. "We discussed this at the community meeting last month. You were there. You nodded when I mentioned expanding our neighborhood events to include wellness activities." I had been at that meeting. Karen had mentioned something vague about wellness activities, but nodding politely during a general discussion was not the same as agreeing to let 50 people camp in my backyard for 3 days. "That was not an agreement," I said. "Nodding during a meeting is not permission to take over my property." Karen's fake smile started to crack. "Look, I understand you might be feeling overwhelmed. Change can be scary, but this retreat will bring so much positive energy to our community. The crystal healing alone will raise the vibration of the entire neighborhood. I do not care about vibrations. I was shouting now. I care about my property rights. You cannot just take my backyard whenever you want. Property rights, Karen laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is about community, not individual selfishness. We live in a neighborhood, not isolated compounds. Sometimes we have to sacrifice our comfort for the greater good. That was when her mask completely slipped. The fake sweetness disappeared, replaced by cold contempt. She was not even pretending anymore that this was about miscommunication or community building. This was about power. This was about her believing she had the right to take whatever she wanted from whoever was too weak to stop her. "You are being selfish and antisocial," she continued, her voice sharp as glass. "Everyone in this neighborhood contributes to community activities except you. You live here, you benefit from property values and neighborhood safety, but you refuse to do your part. My part is not letting strangers camp in my backyard. Your part is being a good neighbor instead of a paranoid hermit." Karen stepped closer, her finger pointed at my chest. "And if you try to disrupt this retreat, I will make sure the HOA knows exactly what kind of neighbor you are. There are rules about disrupting community harmony. There are fines for antisocial behavior." The threat was clear. She would use her influence with the HOA board to punish me for defending my property. She would paint me as the problem neighbor, the one causing trouble by refusing to go along with her schemes. I looked around and realized we had an audience. Mrs. Chen was pretending to water her plants while listening. Mr. Rodriguez was checking his mailbox very slowly. The retired couple from 3 houses down had stopped their morning walk to watch the show. They were all hearing Karen position herself as the reasonable community leader dealing with a difficult resident. They were all seeing me as the angry, shouting neighbor who was trying to ruin a wellness retreat that would benefit everyone. In that moment, I realized that fighting Karen on her terms would never work. She controlled the narrative. She had social influence. She could make me look selfish and unreasonable, no matter how wrong she was. If I wanted to stop her, I needed to change the game entirely. I needed to find a way to turn her tactics against her. I needed to show the neighborhood what Karen was, not by arguing with her, but by forcing her to reveal herself. That night, I started researching property rights, event planning, legal loopholes, and most importantly, how to rent out private property for legitimate events that would be completely legal but devastating to Karen's wellness retreat plans. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop, determined to find a legal way to protect my property. If Karen wanted to play games with fake authority, I would beat her at her own game using real authority. The first thing I discovered was that Karen had been lying about the HOA bylaws, but she had also been ignorant about actual property law. According to state regulations, as long as I owned my property outright and was not violating any city ordinances, I could rent my backyard for private events without any HOA approval required. The HOA could not stop me from using my property for legitimate business purposes. They could not prevent me from hosting legal gatherings. They definitely could not force me to let other people use my space for free while preventing me from profiting from it myself. But what kind of event would be legal, profitable, and incompatible with a wellness retreat? I started browsing event rental websites looking for inspiration. Wedding receptions were too quiet. Birthday parties were too family-friendly. Corporate events were too boring. I needed something that would make yoga and meditation impossible while being completely legitimate. That was when I found the motorcycle rally listings. The Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club was looking for a private space to host their monthly rally. They needed somewhere to park 30 to 40 bikes, set up a barbecue, and hang out for the day. They were willing to pay $500 for a backyard rental, and they preferred locations that were not too close to busy streets because of noise concerns. Perfect. I called the contact number and spoke to a man named Big Mike who had a voice like gravel and a surprisingly professional approach to event planning. I explained my situation honestly. I told him about Karen, about the fake wellness retreat, about months of property theft disguised as community building. "Lady," Big Mike said, "we deal with entitled jerks trying to push people around all the time. Sounds like this Karen character needs a reality check. When did you say her thing was happening?" "This Saturday morning, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., yoga and meditation in my backyard." Big Mike laughed, a sound like a motorcycle engine turning over. 7 a.m. Perfect. We usually start our rallies at sunrise anyway. Nothing like the sound of 30 Harleys firing up to welcome the morning. We worked out the details. The Iron Brotherhood would arrive at 6:30 Saturday morning. They would set up their barbecue equipment, park their motorcycles in formation across my driveway and front yard, and spend the day celebrating motorcycle culture with music, food, and fellowship. Everything would be completely legal. I was renting my private property for a legitimate event. They had proper insurance. They would follow all city noise ordinances. They would clean up after themselves and respect my neighbor's property. But the timing would make Karen's wellness retreat impossible. I spent the next 3 days preparing meticulously. I researched city noise ordinances to make sure the motorcycle rally would not violate any laws. I contacted my insurance company to confirm my coverage for private events. I printed copies of all relevant property laws and HOA bylaws to have ready if anyone questioned my authority. Most importantly, I prepared signs. Professional-looking banners that read, "Welcome Iron Brotherhood Rally Participants," "Private Event," "Authorized Personnel Only," and "Maple Street Community Supports Local Motorcycle Culture." I also prepared my legal defense. If Karen tried to call the police or file HOA complaints, I would be ready with documentation proving that my event was completely legitimate while hers was based on lies and fake authority. Thursday evening, I noticed Karen setting up decorations in my backyard. She had somehow gotten into my fenced area and was hanging prayer flags from my trees. I watched from my window as she arranged meditation cushions in perfect circles and set up a small altar with crystals and candles. She was moving forward with her retreat if my objections had never happened. She was decorating my property like she owned it. She was probably telling people that I had eventually seen reason and agreed to her plans. Friday night, I could not sleep. I kept imagining how Saturday morning would unfold. The sound of motorcycles drowns out meditation music. The sight of leather jackets and bandanas next to yoga mats and organic smoothie stations. The look on Karen's face when she realized her perfectly planned retreat was ruined by my perfectly planned counter-event. But I also worried. What if the HOA sided with Karen anyway? What if the neighbors blamed me for escalating the conflict? What if I was making everything worse by fighting back instead of just accepting Karen's behavior like everyone else seemed to do? Then I remembered her threatening me. Her finger pointed at my chest. Her cold voice promised to use HOA fines to punish me for defending my property. Her complete lack of respect for my rights or my boundaries. Karen had declared war on me months ago. I was just finally choosing to fight back. Saturday morning could not come soon enough. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, mild temperature, gentle breeze. Ideal conditions for both outdoor yoga and motorcycle rallies. I was awake at 5:30, setting up my Welcome Iron Brotherhood rally banners across my front yard. The signs looked official and professional, making it clear that this was a planned, legitimate event. I positioned them strategically so they would be visible from every angle, impossible for Karen to claim this was a spontaneous disruption. At 6:15, I heard the first motorcycle engine rumbling down Maple Street. Then another, then another. The sound was beautiful, deep, powerful, unmistakable. The sound of my plan working perfectly. Big Mike led the procession on a massive Harley-Davidson that gleamed chrome and black in the morning sunlight. Behind him, 32 motorcycles rolled into my driveway in perfect formation. The riders wore leather jackets, bandanas, and expressions of barely contained amusement. They had been briefed on the situation. "Morning, ma'am," Big Mike said, removing his helmet to reveal a gray beard and surprisingly kind eyes. "Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club reporting for rally duty. Where would you like us to set up the barbecue?" I directed them to the best spots in my backyard, right where Karen had placed her meditation circles. The bikers moved with military precision, unloading equipment and setting up their event with respectful efficiency. They were polite, organized, and perfect for my purposes. At 6:45, I saw Karen's car pull into her driveway. She got out carrying yoga mats and a basket of what looked like organic breakfast items. She was wearing flowing white pants and a serene expression that lasted exactly until she looked toward my house. The transformation was instant and spectacular. Serenity became shock, became rage, became panic in the space of 3 seconds. She dropped her yoga mats and ran toward my front door, her white pants flowing behind her like battle flags. "What is this?" she demanded, not bothering to knock. "What are these people doing here?" "Good morning, Karen," I said calmly. "These are the participants in today's Iron Brotherhood rally. I rented my backyard for their monthly gathering." "You cannot do this. I have a wellness retreat scheduled. People are expecting yoga and meditation." "I never agreed to any wellness retreat. My property, my choice." Behind Karen, I could see the first wellness retreat participants arriving. A woman in yoga pants stopped her car in the middle of the street, staring at the line of motorcycles with obvious confusion. A man carrying a meditation cushion stood on the sidewalk looking back and forth between Karen and the bikers, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "This is sabotage," Karen shrieked. "You are deliberately ruining my event." "I am hosting my event," I replied, "on my property, which I have every legal right to do." Big Mike appeared behind me, his massive frame filling the doorway. "Everything okay here, ma'am? This lady seems upset about something." Karen looked up at Big Mike, her face flushed red with fury. "You need to leave immediately. This property is reserved for a community wellness event." Big Mike smiled, an expression that was somehow both friendly and intimidating. "Well, ma'am, we have a signed rental contract and paid deposits. This is our reserved space for the day. Maybe you got confused about the location." More wellness retreat participants were arriving, creating a traffic jam as cars full of yoga mats and meditation supplies encountered a parking lot full of Harley-Davidsons. The contrast was surreal. Peaceful, flowing fabrics next to leather and chrome. Organic smoothies next to beer coolers. Meditation music from car stereos mixes with the rumble of motorcycle engines. "This is ridiculous," Karen shouted. "I am calling the police. I am calling the HOA. This harassment will not stand." "Please do call them," I said, pulling out my folder of legal documentation. "I have all the paperwork right here. Property rental agreement, insurance certificates, can ID permits. Everything is completely legal and legitimate." Corinne pulled out her phone and started dialing frantically. I watched through my window as she paced back and forth, gesturing wildly while talking to whoever answered. Her wellness retreat participants were clustering around her car, looking confused and disappointed. The bikers, meanwhile, were setting up their barbecue and arranging lawn chairs in the exact spots where Corinne had planned meditation circles. They were respectful of my property, friendly to each other, and enjoying the drama unfolding on the other side of my fence. "Hey," called out a biker named Diesel, "should we fire up the bikes for our traditional morning rev ceremony?" "Absolutely," I said. 7 a.m. sounds perfect." At exactly 7 o'clock, 32 motorcycle engines roared to life simultaneously. The sound was magnificent, a symphony of American steel that echoed off every house on Maple Street. Windows rattled, car alarms went off, dogs started barking 3 blocks away. And Karen's wellness retreat became completely, thoroughly impossible. Through my window, I watched her face cycle through every stage of grief in fast forward. Denial, as she tried to convince her participants that the noise would stop. Anger as she realized it would not. Bargaining as she attempted to negotiate with Big Mike. Depression as her perfectly planned event crumbled around her. And finally, acceptance that she had been beaten at her own game. The police arrived an hour later, just as the bikers were serving barbecue breakfast tea, and I was collecting my rental fee. Officer Martinez looked around my property, examined my documentation, and spoke briefly with Big Mike about permits and insurance. "Everything appears to be in order here," he told Karen, who was still demanding that he arrest someone for something. "This is a legal private event on private property. No laws are being broken." Karen's wellness retreat participants were loading their yoga mats back into their cars, shaking their heads and muttering about poor planning and miscommunication. The neighborhood was learning what Karen really was when her plans did not go perfectly. And I was finally, gloriously, triumphantly enjoying my backyard again. The Iron Brotherhood stayed until sunset, exactly as contracted. They barbecued, they told stories, they maintained perfect respect for my property and my neighbors. Several times throughout the day, neighbors stopped by to ask questions, and the bikers were friendly, polite, and surprisingly articulate about motorcycle culture and community values. By 3 in the afternoon, Karen's wellness retreat had completely dissolved. The last disappointed participant drove away around noon, leaving Karen standing alone in her driveway, staring at the motorcycles with undisguised hatred. But something interesting started happening around 4 o'clock. Mrs. Chen knocked on my door. "I owe you an apology," she said, looking embarrassed. "Karen told me you had volunteered your yard for neighborhood events. She made it sound like you were enthusiastic about hosting community activities. I had no idea she was using your property without permission." Mrs. Chen was followed by Mr. Rodriguez, then the Patterson family, then the retired couple from down the street. One by one, my neighbors came to apologize and share their own stories about Karen's manipulation. Mr. Rodriguez had been pressured into donating his lawn mower to community equipment sharing, which only benefited Karen's yard maintenance. The Pattersons had been guilted into providing free catering for events they were never invited to attend. The retired couple had been convinced to pay HOA fees for services that did not exist. Each conversation revealed another piece of Karen's systematic manipulation of the neighborhood. She had been running elaborate schemes disguised as community building, profiting from other people's generosity while contributing nothing herself. She told me I was required to participate in neighborhood improvement projects, Mrs. Patterson said. I spent $200 on plants for what she called the Community Garden Beautification Initiative. Turns out the community garden was just her backyard. She convinced me to pay for a neighborhood security assessment, Mr. Rodriguez added. Said it was mandatory for all homeowners. I never saw any assessment, but she did ask me a lot of detailed questions about my work schedule and when my house would be empty. The pattern was clear. Karen had been using fake authority and social pressure to extract money, labor, and resources from neighbors who trusted her claims about community requirements and HOA policies. But the motorcycle rally had shattered her credibility. When people saw that I could successfully challenge her authority with proper documentation and legal tactics, they started questioning everything else she had told them. By Sunday evening, 3 families had filed formal complaints with the real HOA board about Karen's misrepresentation of community policies. Mrs. Chen had demanded documentation for the fees Karen had collected for non-existent services. Mr. Rodriguez had asked for a full accounting of how his community contributions had been used. Monday morning brought the best news of all. I received a call from Sandra Walsh, Karental HOA Board President. We need to discuss the situation with Karen Morrison, Sandra said. We have received multiple complaints about unauthorized use of HOA authority and misrepresentation of community policies. The board has voted to investigate her claims about community events and property usage rights. The investigation took 2 weeks. During that time, Karen tried desperately to maintain her authority through increasingly frantic social media posts about community values and neighborhood cooperation. But her credibility was gone. Too many people had started asking questions. Too many lies had been exposed. The HOA board found that Karen had never held any official position with community event planning. The paperwork she had shown the police was completely fabricated. The fees she had collected from neighbors had gone into HAL accounts. The Community Events Committee existed only in her imagination. Sandra Walsh delivered the verdict at the monthly HOA meeting, with Karen sitting in the front row looking smaller and more defeated than I had ever seen her. Karen Morrison is hereby prohibited from representing herself as an HOA official or community event coordinator, Sandra announced. Any future use of HOA letterhead or claims of community authority will result in legal action for fraud and impersonation. The room was silent except for the sound of Karen gathering her papers and walking out. No one followed her. No one defended her. The spell was finally broken. 3 months later, my backyard was finally, truly mine again. The HOA board had implemented new policies requiring written consent from property owners before any events could be scheduled on private land. They had also established a real community events committee with elected positions and transparent accounting to prevent anyone from exploiting community spirit for personal gain ever again. Karen tried one last desperate power play in November. She showed up at my door with a clipboard and a fake smile, claiming that new city ordinances required all residents to participate in mandatory neighborhood beautification projects. I closed the door and called Sandra Walsh, who contacted the city and confirmed that no such ordinances existed. Karen received an official cease and desist letter warning her against any further misrepresentation of government or HOA authority. After that, she seemed to give up. She stopped organizing unauthorized events. She stopped collecting fake fees. She stopped pretending to have authority she had never possessed. She became just another neighbor, powerless and ordinary. The Iron Brotherhood kept in touch. Big Mike called every few months to check how I was doing and offer support if Karen tried anything else. Several of the bikers had become genuine friends, stopping by for barbecues and motorcycle maintenance sessions in my garage. "You know what I respect about you," Big Mike told me during one of these visits. "You did not just complain about the problem. You found a solution. Too many people let bullies walk all over them because they are afraid of making waves." He was right. For months, I had tried to be reasonable with someone who had no respect for reason. I had tried to work within a system that Karen had corrupted with lies. I had accepted being victimized because fighting back seemed impolite. But sometimes politeness enables abuse. Sometimes being reasonable means letting unreasonable people win. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to hit back harder than they hit you. The neighborhood was healthier now. People talked to each other directly instead of going through Karen's filter of fake authority. Neighbors collaborated on real community projects instead of being manipulated into supporting Karen's schemes. Property boundaries were respected. Individual rights were protected. I learned that standing up to manipulation requires more than just saying no. It requires understanding the manipulator's tactics and using superior tactics against them. It requires preparation, documentation, and strategic thinking. Most importantly, it requires the courage to escalate when de-escalation only enables further abuse. Karen taught me that some people view kindness as weakness and politeness as permission. She showed me that community spirit can be weaponized by selfish individuals who exploit other people's desire to belong and contribute. But I taught her something too. I taught her that property rights are real even when community pressure is fake. I taught her that legal authority trumps social manipulation. I taught her that some people will not be bullied, no matter how confident and entitled the bully appears. My backyard belongs to me now. The meditation circles are gone, replaced by my garden and outdoor furniture arranged exactly how I want them. The fake community events have been replaced by real friendships and genuine neighborhood cooperation. And every time I hear a motorcycle engine rumbling down Maple Street, I smile and remember the day I learned that sometimes the best way to find peace is to make a little noise. Karen never hosted another unauthorized event in anyone's backyard ever again. Justice served.